The day my wife inherited millions. She didn't come home smiling. She called me, and that's how I knew something was wrong. It was 3:17 p.m. I remember because I was standing in the break room at work, staring at the microwave as it counted down the last 20 seconds of my reheated pasta. The office smelled like burnt coffee and printer ink. Ordinary, predictable, safe. My phone vibrated. Her name flashed across the screen. Elena. She never called during work hours unless it was important. I answered on the second ring. Hey, everything okay? Silence. Not the normal distracted silence. Not the kind where she's walking between rooms or searching for her keys. This silence felt elevated, controlled. Then she said it. I just inherited millions. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because my brain refused to process it. What? My Uncle Victor passed away this morning. The lawyers just confirmed everything. The properties, the accounts, the investments. She inhaled sharply. It's a lot. I leaned against the counter. Victor, the mysterious, childless, old money relative she barely spoke to. The one who sent expensive birthday gifts but never showed up to family gatherings. Alina, I'm sorry he passed, but that's huge. Yes, she said, and that's when I heard it. The shift, not grief, not shock, power. Then she added calmly, pack your things. I blinked. What? I said, pack your things. Her voice hardened. Get out of my house. The microwave beeped behind me. I didn't move. I honestly thought she was joking. Alina, what are you talking about? It's simple. Her tone became clipped, precise. The house is in my name. Always was. You moved in. You benefited. That arrangement ends today. My throat went dry. Is this some kind of... You've had years, she cut in. Years to build something more than mediocrity. That word landed like a slap. Mediocrity. I supported you, she continued. I carried most of the financial weight. And now, I don't need to. There it was, not, we don't need to struggle anymore. I don't need to. I walked out of the break room without realizing it. My coworkers' voices blurred into static. Alina, we're married. For now. The air left my lungs. What does that mean? It means, she said slowly, I finally have options. Options. I closed my eyes. When we met 8 years ago, she loved that I wasn't flashy. She said I made her feel grounded, safe, stable. She used to tell her friends I was the only man who didn't make her feel like she was competing for attention. Now I was insufficient. Did you plan this? I asked quietly. Don't be dramatic. I'm asking if you've been waiting for leverage. Another pause, then. You always knew I was capable of more. Capable of more. So this is about money? It's about standards. Her voice had changed completely now. Cold. Clinical. I won't live small anymore. Live small. Was that what our life was? Sunday breakfasts, movie nights, budget planning spreadsheets, road trips in my aging sedan, laughing in the kitchen when we burned garlic bread. Small. You're serious, I whispered. Yes. Something inside me fractured. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a hairline crack spreading through the foundation of everything I thought was real. When do you want me gone? Tonight. That word echoed. Tonight. Alina. I've already called a locksmith. I felt the floor tilt. You're changing the locks? I'm protecting my assets. Assets. Not marriage. Not partnership. Assets. I stepped outside the office building because suddenly I couldn't breathe. Cars passed. The sky was painfully blue. I thought we were a team, I said. We were, she replied, until I realized I was carrying dead weight. Dead weight. I had never cheated, never lied, never disrespected her. I worked, paid my share, cooked dinner when she worked late, sat with her through anxiety spirals before presentations, held her when she cried about feeling overlooked in her career. Dead weight. When did you start resenting me? I asked. She didn't answer directly. I'm evolving, and I refuse to feel guilty for outgrowing you. Outgrowing, like I was a phase, like I was training wheels, like I was a starter husband. My hands were shaking now. So that's it? 8 years? Be practical. You'll land on your feet. Practical. I let out a small, hollow laugh. You don't even sound like my wife. You're right, she said softly. I don't. And then she hung up. I stood there for a long time. The world didn't collapse. No thunder, no dramatic soundtrack, just traffic, wind, ordinary life continuing as if mine hadn't just detonated. I went back inside, told my boss I felt sick, packed my laptop, and on the drive home, I replayed every conversation from the past 6 months. The subtle criticisms, the way she started correcting my words in public, the new friends, wealthier, sharper, colder. The way she once said at dinner, half joking, some people are meant to lead, others are meant to support. At the time, she squeezed my hand when she said it. Now I wondered if she had already decided which one I was. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was there. The house looked the same, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. I sat in the car for a full 5 minutes before going inside. When I opened the door, she was standing in the living room. Different posture, different energy. She was holding a folder. I've contacted a lawyer, she said. No greeting, no softness, just paperwork. I looked at the woman I married, and for the first time, I realized I had no idea who she was becoming. She didn't cry. That's what stayed with me the most. Not the lawyer's folder in her hand. Not the word assets. Not even the way she said dead weight. It was the absence of grief. Alina stood in the center of what used to be our living room, like she had already mentally redecorated it. Like I was just an outdated piece of furniture, waiting to be removed. I'm not trying to hurt you, she said, smoothing the edge of the folder. I'm being realistic. Realistic. I set my keys down slowly. Realistic would have been a conversation. She sighed. The kind of sigh you give a child who doesn't understand something obvious. I've been having the conversation for years. That hit deeper than I expected. What conversation? The one where I wanted more. Her eyes moved around the room. The couch we picked together. The bookshelf I built myself. The framed photo from our 3rd anniversary when we were broke, but happy and split one slice of cheesecake because we couldn't afford two. This house feels small, she continued. This life feels small. You never said that. I shouldn't have to. There it was again, that quiet superiority, like my failure was in not being psychic. I studied her face. She looked lighter, relieved, as if something heavy had been lifted from her shoulders. Was that weight me? You could have told me you were unhappy. I was ambitious, she corrected. And I wasn't? She hesitated. Not long, just enough to hurt. You were comfortable. Comfortable. The word stung because it was partially true. I wasn't chasing promotions every year. I wasn't obsessed with status. I liked stability. I liked knowing we could pay our bills and sleep peacefully. To me, peace was success. To her, peace had become limitation. She walked to the dining table and laid out the documents. I've already started separating accounts. Already, I repeated. I told you, I have options now. Options. I sat down across from her. When did this stop being about us? Her gaze sharpened. It's always been about us. I just finally have leverage. Leverage. So this was about power, not grief, not independence. Power. You think I held you back, I said quietly. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The silence was confirmation. That night I packed a suitcase, not because I believed it was over, but because I didn't want to beg. Dignity is strange like that. It survives even when everything else doesn't. As I folded my shirts, I noticed how little space I actually took up in the closet. She had more shoes than I had shirts. I used to joke about it. Now it felt symbolic. Minimal footprint, minimal presence, minimal value. She stood in the doorway while I packed, watching, not cruelly, but clinically. You'll find someone more aligned, she said. Aligned. Like I was a mismatched investment portfolio. I zipped the suitcase closed. Did you ever love me? I asked. That question wasn't strategic. It slipped out. She looked uncomfortable for the first time all evening. I loved who we were. That wasn't an answer. I loved how safe it felt, she added. Safe. Past tense. So what changed? I pressed. She crossed her arms. I got tired of shrinking my dreams to fit our budget. I never asked you to shrink. You didn't have to. That one lingered, because maybe I had been afraid of her outgrowing me. Maybe I avoided bigger risks because I didn't want to lose what we already had. Maybe security had become my religion, and maybe she had started worshiping something else. The next morning, movers came. Not for me, for her. New furniture deliveries. A designer consultation. The transformation began instantly. She wasn't just divorcing me. She was upgrading her environment. I stood by the door with my suitcase. Where are you going? She asked. My friend Danilo has a spare room. She nodded. Good. No, I'm sorry. No hesitation. Just good. As I reached for the handle, she spoke again. I don't hate you. That made it worse. Then why does it feel like you do? She studied me carefully. Because you remind me of who I was before I realized my potential. And there it was. I wasn't the enemy. I was the mirror. And she didn't like the reflection. Living out of a friend's guest room at 35 does something to a man. It forces inventory of ego, of identity, of worth. Danilo didn't ask many questions. He just handed me a beer and said, You'll be fine. I wasn't sure, because here's the part no one talks about. When someone you love upgrades their life and removes you from it, you start questioning your own value. Was I mediocre? Was I small? Had I been hiding behind contentment because ambition scared me? For weeks I couldn't sleep. I scrolled through social media and watched her transformation in real time. New clothes, new circles, luxury dinners, photos with captions like, finally stepping into my next level. And every time I saw it, I felt like a stepping stone she'd already crossed. Then came the humiliation. At a mutual friend's gathering, I debated going, but I refused to disappear. When I walked in, conversations paused for half a second, not obviously, but noticeably. Alina arrived later, in a black dress I'd never seen before. She looked radiant. Power suits her. She spotted me across the room. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Recognition. History. Then it vanished. She approached with a polite smile. Mark. Formal, controlled. Alina. Equally distant. How are you? She asked. Loaded question. Stable, I replied. Her lips curved slightly. That's good. There it was again. Subtle condescension. Then one of her new friends joined us. Tall, polished, expensive watch. "Is this your ex?" he asked casually. "Ex." Just like that. "Yes," she said smoothly. No hesitation, no flinch. I realized in that moment she'd already emotionally buried me. I wasn't grieving a marriage. I was grieving a version of her that no longer existed. That night, back at Danilo's apartment, I stared at the ceiling. Something shifted. Not anger. Not revenge. Clarity. Money hadn't created a monster. It had amplified what was already there. Ambition, restlessness, a hunger for status, and maybe a fear of being ordinary. I had loved her for who she was, but I had never asked who she wanted to become, and she had never asked if I wanted to grow differently. We both failed in silence, but she chose power over partnership. And now, I had to decide who I was without her shadow. Because for the first time in 8 years, I wasn't someone's husband. I was just me, and that terrified me. Divorce papers don't arrive with thunder. They arrive in neat envelopes, clean, formal, efficient. 2 weeks after I moved out, a courier knocked on Danilo's apartment door. I already knew what it was before I signed for it. My name printed in bold black letters. My marriage reduced to clauses and signatures. "I expected you to fight," Danilo said quietly as I sat at his kitchen table staring at the stack. "So did I admitted. But fight for what? A woman who had already mentally erased me? You can't negotiate with someone who believes they've upgraded." The lawyer meeting was worse than I imagined. Alina didn't come alone. She brought her attorney, young, sharp, confident, and she wore white. Not accidentally. White blouse, white blazer, white heels. Untouchable. "Let's keep this civil," she said before sitting down. Civil, as if I were the unstable one. Her lawyer slid the settlement proposal toward me, because the house had always technically been under her name. A tax strategy suggested years ago. I had no claim. The inheritance legally protected her new wealth. Our joint savings would be split, but it wasn't much. "You'll walk away with what you brought into the marriage," her lawyer explained. I almost laughed. I brought loyalty, time, support, nights staying up editing her presentations, encouragement when she wanted to quit. But none of that shows up on a balance sheet. "I'm not trying to leave you with nothing," Alina said almost gently. It sounded rehearsed. "You're leaving me with less than nothing," I replied. She looked confused. "Less? You're taking the narrative." She blinked. "What does that even mean?" "It means," I said slowly, "you've already told everyone I was holding you back." Her jaw tightened. "I told people the truth." The truth. It's fascinating how elastic that word becomes when money enters the room. Word spreads fast when someone inherits millions. Suddenly, she wasn't just Alina. She was Alina with the estate. People who barely tolerated her ambition before now praised it. Investors courted her. Old acquaintances resurfaced. I became a footnote in her story. And then came the article. One of her new business contacts ran a small online magazine focused on women redefining power. Guess who was featured? I didn't mean to read it, but curiosity is cruel. There she was, photographed in what used to be our living room, now completely redesigned. Minimalist, expensive, unrecognizable. The headline, "From Ordinary to Extraordinary, How Sudden Wealth Unlocked Her True Potential." Ordinary. The article mentioned her previous life constraints and how she had been emotionally tethered to small thinking. Emotionally tethered. I felt physically ill. Danilo read it too. Did she just call you small thinking? She didn't use my name, I muttered. That makes it worse. He wasn't wrong. Because when someone erases you publicly, you don't even get the dignity of confrontation. The final blow came at the house. I went back once to collect the last of my belongings. A box of old notebooks, my grandfather's watch, some framed photos she had removed from the walls. She wasn't home, or so I thought. When I stepped into what used to be our bedroom, I heard laughter. Male laughter. Low, confident. I froze. It wasn't intimate, but it was comfortable, like someone already belonged there. I stood in the hallway, gripping the box in my hands. Then I heard her voice, different tone, playful, light. I didn't walk in. I didn't need to. Some knowledge arrives without visual confirmation. She had already replaced the space I occupied. The physical one. The emotional one had been replaced long ago. As I walked out, the front door opened. And there she was, with him, tall, polished, designer coat. He looked at me with polite curiosity. "Oh," she said, no panic, no guilt, just mild inconvenience. "I thought you were coming later. I just needed the rest of my things." Her new companion extended his hand. "Adrian." I stared at it for a second too long before shaking. His grip was firm, confident, like someone used to closing deals. "Mark," I said. "Nice place," he added, glancing around. "Nice place. It used to be ours." She noticed the tension. "This is temporary," she said casually. "We're considering something larger." "Of course you are." Adrian smiled faintly. "Well, good to meet you." And then he placed his hand on the small of her back. Not possessively, naturally, like he had the right. That small gesture hurt more than the inheritance. Because money can be abstract. Touch is not. Driving away from the house, I didn't cry. I didn't punch the steering wheel. I didn't scream. I felt hollow, like a structure that had been carefully dismantled brick by brick. Here's the psychological truth no one prepares you for. When someone leaves you because they believe they've ascended, you don't just grieve them, you question your altitude. Was I too grounded, too risk-averse, too satisfied with stability? That night, something dangerous crept in. Comparison. I Googled Adrian, investor, startups, aggressive growth strategies. Of course, he represented expansion. I represented maintenance. She didn't want maintenance. She wanted acceleration. And acceleration always feels sexy at first. Weeks turned into months. The divorce finalized faster than I expected. She didn't contest anything, didn't prolong it. Efficiency was her new love language. But here's what wealth doesn't teach you immediately. It magnifies pressure. I started hearing whispers through mutual friends, investments that were bold, partnerships that were ambitious, high-risk ventures. Adrian wasn't just charming, he was aggressive. And Alina, drunk on possibility, followed. Not because she was stupid, but because power feels intoxicating when you've never held it before. Meanwhile, I started something small, a consulting side project, helping mid-sized businesses optimize operations. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't flashy, but it was mine. For the first time, my identity wasn't tied to being someone's stabilizer. It was tied to my own competence. And slowly, painfully slowly, I stopped measuring myself against her spotlight. One evening, 3 months after the divorce, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Mark?" Her voice, different. Not cold, not powerful, just tense. "Yes." Silence. Then, "Have you ever felt like things are moving too fast?" I leaned back in my chair. Finally, a crack. Fast how? She hesitated. I thought I wanted expansion, but sometimes I feel like I'm chasing something I can't define. That wasn't an apology, but it wasn't arrogance either. What are you asking me? I said carefully. I don't know. For the first time since the inheritance, she sounded uncertain. And uncertainty doesn't pair well with millions, because money removes excuses. If you're unhappy after that, the problem isn't external anymore. It's internal. I hope you find what you're looking for, I told her. It wasn't passive-aggressive, it was honest. There was a long pause. Do you hate me? She asked quietly. I considered it. No, I said. I just don't recognize you. She inhaled shakily. I don't always recognize myself either. And that was the first moment I realized. This story wasn't about her outgrowing me. It was about her racing herself. And no inheritance in the world can guarantee you'll like who you become when you finally get everything you asked for. There's a quiet kind of strength you discover when no one is watching. Not the kind that posts wins online, not the kind that needs applause, the kind that builds itself in silence. After the divorce finalized, I stopped tracking her life, not out of discipline, out of survival. Because every time I saw her new world, the galas, the investors, the high-rise dinners, I felt that old ache of comparison clawing at my ribs. So I did something radical. I focused inward. My consulting project wasn't glamorous. It started with one client, a small logistics company struggling with inefficiencies. I worked out of Danilo's spare room, surrounded by unpacked boxes and secondhand furniture. But I worked like a man rebuilding his spine. Late nights, spreadsheets, operational models. I realized something uncomfortable. I had always been competent. I just never needed to prove it loudly. And competence, when sharpened, becomes power. Not flashy power, quiet power, the kind that compounds. 3 months in, I secured a second client, then a third. Referrals came not because I was charismatic, I wasn't, but because I solved problems. Stability suddenly became attractive again. Just not in a marriage, in business. I began structuring my own firm, registered it, branding, systems, growth strategy. Ironically, I started thinking bigger than I ever had before, not because I wanted to compete with her, but because I finally had no emotional anchor tying my ambition to someone else's comfort. That realization unsettled me. Had I subconsciously limited myself because I didn't want to threaten her, or because I was afraid of failing publicly? Either way, the fear was gone now. I had already survived humiliation. What else could break me? Then the news broke, not in headlines, in whispers. One of Adrian's ventures collapsed, a high-risk tech acquisition that had been heavily leveraged. I didn't celebrate, but I noticed. A week later, another rumor surfaced. Liquidity issues, cash flow pressure, overexposure. Aggression is thrilling in expansion, terrifying in contraction, and contraction had arrived. One evening, I attended a networking event, something I would have avoided a year ago. I wore a suit I bought myself, tailored, sharp, not to impress her, to respect myself. Halfway through the night, I felt it, that shift in the room, the subtle awareness that someone important had arrived. I turned. Alina, but not the radiant white blazer version. She looked strained, still beautiful, still composed, but the energy was different. Adrian wasn't with her. For the first time, she approached me, not out of superiority, out of need. Mark, Her voice carried something fragile. Alina, we stood facing each other like two survivors of the same storm, but on different shores. You look different, she said. Healthy? I suggested. She almost smiled. Confident. That too. There was a pause. I've heard about your firm, she added. Word travels. Yes. She hesitated. You've grown. That sentence meant more than she realized, because it acknowledged something she once denied. I had to, I replied. She swallowed. I didn't mean to make you feel small. The apology was soft, unpolished, real. You didn't make me small, I said calmly. I just didn't know how big I could be. Her eyes flickered. That wasn't the response she expected. She studied me carefully. You're not angry. I was, I admitted. But anger is heavy, and I got tired of carrying weight that wasn't mine. That hit her. I saw it land. How are things? I asked, carefully neutral. She glanced away. Volatile. Honest. For the first time, she continued, I feel exposed. Money does that, I said. It removes excuses. Her lips parted slightly. You've changed. So have you. Yes, she whispered, but I'm not sure I like who I'm becoming. There it was again. The doubt. When she inherited millions, she thought she had unlocked freedom, but freedom without self-knowledge becomes chaos. You chased acceleration, I said gently, but you never asked where you wanted to go. She stared at me. You always did that, she murmured. Did what? Asked questions that made me uncomfortable. I almost laughed. You used to call that small thinking. She flinched. I was cruel. You were afraid. That surprised her. Afraid? Of being ordinary? Silence wrapped around us, because she knew it was true. Weeks later, the second collapse happened, this time public. Adrian's name attached to a failed expansion strategy, debt exposure, investors withdrawing, the glamorous narrative cracked. And when power cracks, it does so loudly. The article that once celebrated her transformation now published a follow-up. Rapid growth, rapid risk. The tone was colder, less admiring. Money amplifies success, but it also amplifies mistakes. Then came the call, not sharp, not commanding, soft. Can we talk? I stared at my phone for a long time before responding. Yes. We met at a quiet cafe, neutral territory. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, energetically. I thought wealth would protect me, she said after we ordered. From what? I asked. From feeling inadequate. That honesty startled me. Did it? I asked. She shook her head slowly. It magnified it. That's the thing about sudden power. If you don't heal your insecurities first, they just scale with your bank account. She folded her hands. I was embarrassed of us, she admitted, because we were stable. Yes, and stability felt like failure. She nodded. Tears formed. Not dramatic, but restrained. I thought if I built something bigger, I'd feel bigger. And I feel exposed. I let that sit. I'm not here to say I told you so, I said. I know. I loved you when you were ambitious, I continued. I just didn't think ambition required destruction. She inhaled shakily. I thought you were holding me back. And now? She looked directly at me. I think you were grounding me. That distinction mattered. Holding back versus grounding. One feels like restriction, the other feels like balance. But here's what she didn't realize. I was no longer the man who needed to be chosen. Something had shifted permanently. When you rebuild yourself from humiliation, you stop chasing validation from the person who discarded you. I don't regret loving you, I told her quietly. Her eyes filled. But I won't be your safety net while you figure yourself out. That sentence changed the air between us. You think I'm here to come back? She asked softly. I think you're here because the narrative cracked. She didn't deny it. And if I was, she whispered. I looked at her carefully. I'm not the same man you left. Neither of us said the next part out loud. And I'm not sure you'd recognize him either. As I walked away from that cafe, I realized something profound. She thought money gave her power, but real power is this: the ability to walk away calmly from the person who once walked away from you. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt complete. There's a moment when someone who once discarded you begins to look at you differently, not with love, not even with regret, but with recalibration. That moment happened the night Adrian officially disappeared from her life. I didn't hear it from her. I heard it through the same whisper network that once celebrated her glow-up. Partnership dissolved, legal disputes, asset restructuring, liquidity freeze. When aggressive men fall, they fall loudly. But when ambitious women fall beside them, the world watches with quiet satisfaction. It's cruel. Success makes you admired. Failure makes you observed. She didn't call immediately. Pride lingers even after collapse. But 3 weeks later, at 11:42 p.m., my phone lit up. Alina. I stared at it. I could ignore it. That would be poetic. But I answered. Mark. No control in her voice this time. Just exhaustion. Yes. I'm not asking for money. That was her first sentence. I almost smiled at the irony. I wasn't assuming you would. I just, she exhaled shakily. I need someone who remembers who I was before all of this. There it was. Not a request for partnership, a request for familiarity, for refuge. Why me? I asked calmly. Because you knew me when I wasn't performing. That word landed, performing. Are you saying you've been performing? I asked. A long pause. Yes. That was the most honest thing she had said in a year. We met again, this time in my office. Not a borrowed room, not Danilo's apartment. My office. Modest but elegant. Glass walls, clean lines. Quiet authority. She noticed immediately. You built this. Yes. How? Slowly. That answer held more weight than she realized. She walked around the space, running her fingers lightly along the conference table. It felt grounded. I took your advice. She turned. My advice? I stopped living small. Her expression shifted. Is that what you think you're doing? No, I said evenly. I think I stopped confusing noise with growth. She swallowed. The truth hurts more when it's calm. She sat down across from me. No lawyer, no folder, no power posture. Just a woman who looked tired. Adrian leveraged more than I understood, she admitted. I signed documents I should have questioned. Expansion deals I didn't fully examine. Why? She hesitated. Because I didn't want to look inexperienced. There it was. The fear of being ordinary. She inherited wealth, but she hadn't inherited wisdom. I thought if I moved fast enough, no one would see the gaps, she continued. But they did, I said gently. Yes, her voice cracked. They did. Here's something nobody tells you about sudden success. If you build your identity on elevation, any descent feels like annihilation. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt sober, because I had once loved this woman deeply, and watching her unravel wasn't satisfying. It was instructive. I thought money would silence the insecurity, she whispered. It amplified it, I said. She nodded. I pushed you away because you reminded me of patience, and patience felt like weakness. And now? Now I see it was strength. Silence filled the room, but it wasn't the sharp, cutting silence of our divorce. It was reflective, heavy, honest. "Do you ever think about us?" she asked suddenly. I considered lying. "No, but that wouldn't be true." "Yes," I admitted, "but not the way you think." She leaned forward slightly. "How?" "I think about how we were before ambition became a competition." She closed her eyes. "I miss that version of us." "I don't." Her eyes snapped open. That surprised her. "You don't?" "No." Because here's the truth I hadn't fully spoken yet. I didn't miss the version of me that needed to be chosen. I didn't miss shrinking my growth to keep the peace. I didn't miss mistaking stability for self-silencing. That marriage taught me, but it wasn't meant to last. "You don't want to try again?" she asked quietly. There it was, the unspoken request finally spoken. Not dramatic, not desperate, but vulnerable. And vulnerability can be more powerful than wealth. I leaned back in my chair. "Why?" I asked. Her voice trembled slightly. "Because I see you now." "And you didn't before?" "No." That honesty mattered. "I see what you've built. I see how you move. You're steady." I held her gaze. "I was always steady." She looked down. "I know." Here's a psychological shift she didn't anticipate. When someone leaves you believing you are inadequate, and you rebuild without them, you stop seeking their recognition. It becomes irrelevant. "I don't hate you," I said calmly, "but I'm not the man you left anymore." She whispered, "I don't need you to be." "That's not the point." She waited. "I needed to become someone who chose himself." That sentence changed everything, because she realized something in that moment. She wasn't competing with another woman. She was competing with the version of me that no longer required her approval. Her eyes filled with tears. "I was cruel," she said. "Yes." "I was arrogant." "Yes." "I was scared." "I know." She exhaled shakily. "And you're not angry." "I was," I repeated. "But anger would have kept me tied to you." That landed. "I don't want to lose you completely," she whispered. "You already did," I said gently. Silence. Then the question she'd been circling since the beginning. "Is there someone else?" I didn't answer immediately, because the answer wasn't romantic. It was structural. "Yes," I said finally. Her breath hitched. "She doesn't compete with my ambition," I continued. "She supports it, and I support hers." Elena closed her eyes. "She doesn't see you as small." "No." That hurt her more than any insult could have, because it confirmed something irreversible. I had found alignment, not acceleration, alignment. And alignment is something money can't purchase. When she stood to leave, she paused at the door. "I thought millions would change my life," she said softly. "They did." "Yes," she whispered. "They showed me who I was without you." I nodded. "And who was that?" She gave a sad smile. "A woman still trying to outrun herself." She walked out of my office without asking me to follow, without asking me to reconsider. Because deep down, she knew some doors close not because of pride, but because growth changes the architecture. As I sat alone after she left, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. She once told me to pack my things and get out of her house, and I did. But in leaving, I found something far more valuable than property: self-respect. And self-respect doesn't fluctuate with inheritance. There's something poetic about closure that doesn't scream. It doesn't slam doors, it doesn't throw accusations. It simply arrives. A week after Alina left my office, I ran into her again. Not planned, not orchestrated, at a charity gala, the kind she used to thrive in. Crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors, quiet conversations about investments disguised as philanthropy. I almost didn't attend, but the firm had sponsored a segment, Invisibility Matters. When I walked into that ballroom, something felt different. Not about her, about me. I wasn't scanning the room for her approval. I wasn't shrinking or inflating myself. I was just present. And presence is a form of power. She saw me before I saw her. I felt it, that subtle shift in air. When our eyes met across the room, time didn't slow. There was no dramatic tension, just recognition. She walked toward me, alone. No Adrian, no entourage, no performance. "You look comfortable here," she said. "I am." She studied me carefully. "People are talking about you. Hopefully good things. Very good things." There was something almost proud in her tone, and that surprised me. "I underestimated you," she said softly. "You misjudged me," I corrected. She nodded. "Yes, there's a difference. Underestimating implies you thought I was less. Misjudging means you never fully looked." Music swelled around us. The room buzzed, but between us, there was clarity. "I used to think power was about dominance," she admitted, "about having leverage. And now, I think it's about stability." That word again, the one she once despised. "Stability isn't sexy when you're insecure," I said. She exhaled a small laugh. "No, it isn't." We stood in silence for a moment. Then she asked the question that had been hovering for months. If I hadn't inherited that money, would we still be together? I didn't answer immediately, because the truth wasn't simple. "No," I said finally. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "No? No. Why?" "Because the money didn't create the fracture," I said calmly. "It revealed it." That hit her harder than anger ever could have. She swallowed. "So it was always going to end?" "Yes." She absorbed that quietly. "Then why does it hurt more now?" she asked. "Because now you know what you lost. Not the house, not the lifestyle. Me. But here's the part that mattered. I wasn't saying it to hurt her. I was saying it because it was true." Later that evening, I stepped outside for air. The city lights shimmered below. Footsteps approached behind me. "I used to think you were afraid of growth," she said softly. I didn't turn around immediately. "And now?" "I think you were just building differently." I finally faced her. "And you?" She gave a faint smile. "I was chasing noise." There it was, the final acknowledgement. Not dramatic, not desperate, just honest. "I'm not angry at you anymore," she said. "I'm not angry either. Do you forgive me?" I considered that carefully. "Forgiveness isn't the right word," I said. "Then what is?" "Acceptance." She looked confused. "I accept that you did what you thought you needed to do. And, and I accept that I deserve better." That sentence settled between us like a final brick in a completed wall. No cracks, no instability, just structure. "You've changed," she whispered. "Yes." "In a good way." "Yes." She nodded slowly. "Are you happy?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes." Not because my life was perfect, not because success erased pain, but because I no longer built my identity around someone else's validation. That's happiness, not euphoria, not wealth. Alignment. She stepped closer, not touching me, just within proximity. "I thought money made me powerful," she said quietly, "but losing you showed me how fragile I was." I didn't respond, because some realizations belong to the person who discovers them. "I told you to get out of my house," she continued, "and you built your own." "Yes." She smiled softly. I didn't expect you to thrive. I didn't either. That made her laugh through tears. I guess we both misjudged you. We did. A car pulled up at the entrance behind us. I saw her notice it. She followed my gaze. A woman stepped out. Calm, confident, not flashy. She caught my eye and smiled. No insecurity, no territorial tension, just trust. Alina looked between us. That's her? Yes. She looks, steady. She is. Alina nodded slowly. Take care of him, she said quietly as my partner approached. I plan to, she replied with calm warmth. No competition, no hostility, just alignment. And that's when Alina truly understood. She didn't lose to another woman. She lost to my evolution. As I watched her walk away one final time, I didn't feel revenge. I didn't feel triumph. I felt gratitude. Because sometimes the person who tells you to leave is the one who forces you to find yourself. She inherited millions. I inherited clarity. And clarity is the only wealth that doesn't fluctuate. If there's one thing I learned, it's this. Money magnifies who you already are. Power exposes your fractures. And love isn't about elevation. It's about alignment. She told me to pack my things and get out of her house. So I did. And in walking away, I built a life no inheritance could ever buy.